Okay, perfect. I think we'll get started here. Hello, everyone. My name is Joe, and I'm excited to welcome you all for tonight's author talk presented in partnership with the Kamloops Society for the Written Arts. Tonight, we welcome JP Baker from the Kamloops Society for the Written Arts as our guest host, and Kamloops author Tamara McPherson Vukusic as our guest author. I have a couple quick announcements before I turn my host duties over to JP for the evening. If you can't stay with us for the whole event tonight, that's no problem. After the event is over, recording will be available on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. And if you joined us on Zoom, your video and microphone will remain off throughout tonight's event. If you're watching this event on YouTube Live, feel free to type any questions you have into the comment section of the video. I'll be monitoring this and I will ensure that Tamara gets your question for the Q&A period. If you're on Zoom, you can always type your questions, any questions you have into the chat area. And so with further ado, I will turn the presentation over to JP.
Thank you so much, Joe, and thank you to the Thompson-Nicola Regional Library. It's always a pleasure to partner with you folks on these cool things. We've had a lot of conversations about how we do this in the midst of a pandemic and do these virtual events, and I'm so glad that we're doing these. We've actually been able to expand our reach doing these virtually. I'd like to start actually just by acknowledging that we're gathered, however, virtually, or we're presenting here from the traditional and unceded territory of the Secwepemc people in this beautiful territory called Secwepemc. I came down the valley today and wandered around downtown actually in Kamloops. It's very interesting to see the season change. And I encourage you, if you are joining us from a different territory, I encourage you to just pop that in the chat there. We'd love to see where you're joining from. And if you're not sure which territory you're on, I encourage you to look it up and learn that and pop it in the chat whenever you can. So my name is JP Baker. I'm with the Kamloops Society for the Written Arts. We collaborate with the library on these author talks. We also do a writers festival and all sorts of workshops and fun events. And actually Tamara has been involved in some of that work. So I'm super happy to be able to welcome Tamara to this little event. I've known Tamara for a while. Actually, our kids went to school together. And so we have a personal connection there, but also I have a huge respect for Tamara and the wide range of things that she has done. She went to school back east in Ottawa. She's also lived up north. She's making her own obituary writer's job very difficult by packing a lot into her life and having such a wide range of involvements and activities. I have huge admiration for her energy and her intelligence. So this is a special treat for me to be able to welcome her. I just sent Obittersweet to my father for his birthday the other day, actually, because he's always sending me obituaries, people he knows, people he doesn't know. And I know that he's going to be delighted by this book. So I know Tamara actually has lots to tell you about her book and herself. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Tamara. So welcome, Tamara. It's so good to have you here.
Oh, that was a beautiful introduction. Thanks, JP. The admiration's mutual. I am going to start by pulling up this. This is an article where the book all started for me. It was a personal essay that was in the Globe and Mail, and I was having a little chuckle as I was getting ready to do this session tonight, because I'm reading that the title is, the little intro title is, I've been reading newspaper death notices for the better part of a decade. And someone called me on this recently because I talk about how I started reading obituaries in my early 20s, which is true. And then I recently turned 50, and someone kind of anyway, I was put on the spot to do the math. So I'm actually coming up on 3 decades of reading obituaries, which hit hard. So backing up to the Globe and Mail article, some friends encouraged me to share with the Globe and Mail an article that I'd written and posted on my Facebook page about the lessons I've learned from reading obituaries. And I did, and the Globe got back to me and they accepted the article. And so it ran back in November a year ago. And the next day I got a call from Mosaic Press Publishing. They're in Oakville, just outside of Toronto. And they asked me if I could turn it into a book. And of course, that was an exciting call to get. And so it began. And so I wrote, sat down to write this book. And, you know, I have thousands and thousands of obituaries that I've clipped over the years. I've clipped my favorites. And so I was pretty overwhelmed at first and had to figure out how to organize them. And I came up with the idea of organizing them by calendar month. And then they very nicely started to slip into these themes, like February is, for example, stories of love and how people met. And then May, for example, because it's Mother's Day, I chose to focus on others that mother. So people who have influenced the lives of young people who aren't their parent. You know, and then we have September, which in honor of Terry Fox is stories of overcoming adversity. So the obituaries started to organize themselves quite nicely. And so this is the book, Obittersweet, Life Lessons from Obituaries. Some people have asked me about the title, and it actually came to me quite quickly as a working title. And I always thought maybe I'd change it, and then it stuck, and I got some positive feedback on it. So I've kept it. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how the book is organized. It's organized every lesson, so it's broken into 120 lessons, 10 lessons per chapter related to the calendar month. I include an excerpt from a real obituary. And then I flesh that out a little bit with other details from the person's obituary, as well as sometimes some little anecdotes from my own life. And then each lesson concludes with a question that encourages the reader to reflect on their own life and perhaps how they can incorporate that lesson, or, you know, some wisdom shared from the excerpt from the obituary in their own life. So what I've decided to do tonight is I'm going to do some readings, but a little bit like I think about when I went to Highland Park Distillery years ago in Scotland, how you have to go to the distillery to get the 18-year-old bottle of scotch. What I want to share with you is a little bit of the backstory for what the little bits I read with you, because a huge part of this book was getting in touch with families to get permission to use the excerpt from their loved one's obituary. And so, one second. Not only did I have to find the person, which in some cases is really tricky. Like I had, for example, a Daniel Allen I needed to find in Toronto. Well, apparently there's 14 of them in Kamloops alone. Actually, someone has written a song about the name Daniel Allen. There are so many Daniel Allens. So I sent out hundreds of letters, emails. I met some people along the way by mistake. For example, I was looking for a John Stewart, and I met the wrong John Stewart, but he was fascinated by my project, and we're still in touch regularly. And he is actually a longtime writer for Mississauga News. And so he did a really beautiful opinion piece about Obittersweet a couple of weeks ago. So I've had some cool interactions that way. So I'm going to start doing some reading here. Okay. And I did also want to mention that in the process of letting people know that I was writing this book, and with the Globe article coming out, I have had dozens, actually hundreds of people reach out to me to let me know they read obituaries. There are truly an enormous number of people that read obituaries. And I think it's just not something they think to talk to other people about until they have a reason to, right? Which is that sense of camaraderie. So I want to start by reading an excerpt from the obituary of Joanna Helfinger. And she, here, I'm going to get her. Sorry here. I thought this was fitting considering the time that we're in right now, and doing a Zoom call like this. So Joanna Helfinger, 1930 to 2019, and her lesson is be a world citizen without leaving home. Here's the excerpt. One of her most memorable enthusiasms was for Ireland, its history, people, and music. During this phase, she sought out Irish people, making friends and charming, as well as frightening them with her zeal. Joanna proves it will never be too late to quench your curiosity about other cultures and places. If we all run out of carbon credits and airplane travel becomes obsolete, we can take a page from Joanna's life and discover that it's possible to explore another culture without leaving the country. We are enjoying meeting the new family in our street. They recently explained the meaning behind Diwali, the Hindu festival of lights, while their kids circled around us, one on a bike, one chasing the one on the bike. This fall, we marveled at the front window of their home as it played host to dozens of candles that lit up the joyous faces of their friends and families gathering to celebrate. Our street had never accommodated so many parked cars, and neighbors in every direction were curious about what had brought so many people on a weekday evening in November. I loved learning about this beautiful ceremony, and last week we received an invitation for a home-cooked Indian meal. The spiritual symbolic celebration on our cul-de-sac brought with it all that Diwali symbolizes: victory of light over darkness, good over evil, and knowledge over ignorance. So my question to you is, what place, culture, or festivals can you explore without using carbon credits? Do you have neighbors or work colleagues who might be a starting point? The anecdote that I wanted to share on that one is Joanna's obituary was written by her daughter, Nancy. I had the pleasure of, Joanna has a son, and she had a daughter. And I had the pleasure of getting to know Michael a little bit after I got in touch with him to ask permission to include this excerpt in the book. And he explained to me that his sister had written the obituary, but that she had passed away 3 months before their mother had, and how grateful he was that, in essence, she was there with him because she had written this obituary, and I think that's just I found that very touching. So I wanted to share that with you. I want to read to you an excerpt about Nicholas Owens. Okay. So the lesson in Obittersweet from Nicholas is: home is the people, not the place. Nicholas Arnold Duquette Owens, 1995 to 2020. Nick lived his life in our small house, surrounded by a tight-knit clan of other loving, generous families in the beach neighborhood of Toronto. He was intensely loyal to his family. When Nick was the youngest of 3 and the family moved from a 2 to a 4-bedroom house, the siblings refused to decamp from their shared room. Some of us find ourselves living life as if it were a board game. We start at go with nothing and then incrementally collect money and material goods until someone says you win. Getting a bigger property or more properties is the underlying goal. That and staying out of jail. I imagine the excited flurry of questions from Nick's parents when they showed their big new home to their 3 kids for the first time. Which room do you want? The one with the view of the oak tree or the one with the big closet? Did they dot their enthusiasm with, you finally have enough space for a desk in your room? We can imagine that Nick and his siblings flummoxed their parents when they opted to continue to cram into the same bedroom. Nick reminded them, and now he has reminded us, that bricks and mortar do not make the home. Home is the people living in it. In my early childhood home, one of the greatest treats was sandwiching between 2 of my older sisters on the floor of their shared bedroom. They would pull their foam mattresses off their toe-to-toe beds, and we'd all line up side by each. It didn't bother me one iota that I'd slip between the cracks of the 2 foamies. We'd sing roll over, they all rolled over and one rolled out, and we'd talk until my brain would fall asleep, but my mouth kept moving. As someone whose home went from enveloping a family of 7 to a family of 2, my mom and me, at the age of 9, I know that Nick shared something exquisite with his siblings. So my question to you is, Is there something bigger that you are working towards? And are you willing to stop and consider if bigger will really be better? When I first, the first version of Obittersweet didn't include anyone under the age of 50. And I think a big part of that in reflection was that I think it's a lot easier to have, you know, humor and to be tongue in cheek when someone dies when they're older, and it's rare to find humor in the obituary of someone who died young. But there certainly are lessons, and I realized by not including younger people in the book that my message was that a shorter life, that someone who didn't live as long wasn't leaving us with lessons. And then I know that's just not true. I lost my brother when he was 18, and I became very determined to include younger people in the book, but it was very hard for me to contact the families because I knew how much pain would still be there. And so getting in touch with Nick's family became harder for me when I did the search to find the family. And I came across, so he died during COVID, May 26, 2020. And so when I was researching the family, I came across a Globe and Mail article that was printed actually just 5 days before I was going to contact them. So June 26th. And it was an article where they came forth to talk about his opioid overdose. And they wanted to come forth because they live in an affluent neighborhood in Toronto, and they wanted to be part of dispelling the stigma or the myth around opioid crisis. And it made it really hard for me to make that call, but I knew that I needed to. And so I reached out to the mother, Laurette, on August 12th. And this is, I just want to read a very little part of this email. Dear Tamara, I am speechless, flattered, and so very happy to read your email and to absolutely give you my blessing to include Nick's obituary in your upcoming book. She writes a little bit, it's a little more private about the process of writing the obituary. And then I wanted to share this with you. I will ask you one favor, and that is to please take a look at the lovely tribute our Canoe Kayak Club has posted on its website. All 4 of their children were involved from little through all the years at their local canoe club down the street. In particular, I want to share the photos of a really special memorial our friends and neighbors held for us on the beach in front of the canoe club. Everyone placed a stone in his name spelled out on the sand. Because of COVID, our friends came up with this exquisite alternative to a funeral. And then she included a link. So I wanted to share, I'm going to just share my screen because I want to show you, I want to show you a photo. So this is the photo from that she had shared with me. And so this is 50 people gathered on the beach in Toronto as a memorial service, a tribute to Nicholas. And then this is his name was actually spelled out in a circle on the beach around everyone. I thought that was really beautiful, and I wanted to share that with you. Okay. It's pretty special, hey? Okay. I want to share Irene Voyatis with you. So her lesson from her obituary, I quite like this one because I live with a man, my husband's a real ham bone. He's a like sort of quintessentially funny guy. And if I have any sense of humor, it's in a very sort of understated way. I think I can find a little bit of humor when I write. And so I think this is why Irene is my hero, because she did too. So this is in the chapter for April, which is in honor of April Fool's Day, I focus on 10 different types of funny. And so this is the creative funny. Irene Mavis Boyadas, 1928 to 2019. She loved to pen witty poems for friends' milestones, in brackets, as well as rhyming guidelines for cottage bathroom protocol, showcasing her humor and intellect. Every project, whether creative or compulsory, became an imaginative labor of love. Among many other artistic talents, alongside middle school teaching, Irene was known for her clever couplet writing. She was born in Scotland and raised by her grandmother. Couplet writing took root in Scotland with the penning of The Brew by John Barber. This is a wonderful reminder that our own brand of humor and the way it is expressed can find its roots in our culture. I would love to know if Irene wrote couplets as a child alongside her grandmother. I can imagine them taking turns reading their finished work aloud to each other with a lovely Scottish lilt full of dramatic oral and facial expression. A friend of ours posted a love letter in his bathroom that he wrote to a girl in his grade 4 class. It deepened my appreciation for him, especially his ability to laugh at himself even after a good-natured ribbing. I've always felt that I can express myself far better with my writing or a mixed cassette tape than with spoken words. So I'm grateful to learn that Irene made her mark with her informal written offerings. My question to you is, what childhood influences come to play in your sense of humor? Can you see glimpses of the humor of your parents, grandparents, or other family members in your sense of humor? I was pleased when I had sent this to Irene's son and daughter, and they wrote me back saying that that's exactly how they had imagined it. They love to imagine their mom and their grandmother writing together. And so Athena, her daughter, sent me some pictures of some poetry that Irene wrote when she was in Scotland. And they figure she was 6 years old when she wrote this poem I'm going to show you. Now look at this. I'll give you a second to take a look. And look at the printing. Prints like that, just amazing. So her email here said, Dear Tamara, I found my mother's photo album of her life story, which she compiled when she was 80. The album contained a little book of poems and stories by I.M.H., Irene Mavis Heggie, written at age 6 in Scotland. Oops. I'm sorry, I don't know how to not share this. Oh, there we are. Did I share it? Am I here? Sorry.
You're here. We can't see your screen though, Tamara.
Oh, I'm just gonna, okay, great. Sorry, if I can just take a second to show this. It's just so beautiful.
Sure, of course, yeah.
Now are we on? Can you see it now?
No problem, we can see it.
Good. This makes me want to save absolutely everything, which I already do actually. So, but it's going to be hard to throw anything out after seeing this. Okay. Thank you to everyone for being here. I'm really loving this. You know, because of COVID, I haven't had a launch or a book signing. This is really the first celebration of the book, and I'm so glad you're here to share this with me. Thank you. Okay, Evelyn Mitchell. So Evelyn Mitchell, 1933 to 2019. Her lesson is honor with a name. Even in her last days, she took care to let you know that the baby is Rosalie Evelyn. Let's be clear. It takes just seconds to add a middle name or names to a birth certificate application form, but the magnitude of honor bestowed is immeasurable. In Canada, Name Act laws are a provincial matter. In Quebec, for example, it is recommended to limit the number of given names to 4. But naming honors aren't limited to babies. We have a room in our home dedicated to a friend we met in Iqaluit, Nunavut, who kept her home open to children from morning until night. She doled out an endless supply of healthy snacks. Her kitchen table was always equipped with paint and good quality paper for anyone who took an interest, and there were many. Years ago, I stood on a wobbly stool and painted the Beth McKenty room on a wall spanning one side of the dedicated room to the other. The quality of the hand-painted letters is dicey, but they honor and remind us of an exceptional human. Just realized, actually, those letters are up there somewhere on that wall. There they are. I painted that a long time ago in honor of Beth McKenty. So my question to you is, if you're finished naming babies, is there something else you could name in honor of someone you feel is pretty exceptional? Now, Evelyn's family is very special to me. They originally sent in, Evelyn's daughter Terry sent in Evelyn's obituary to me when I was interviewed on CBC Maritime Noon right after the Globe and Mail article. So it was a year ago, January. And it's a beautiful obituary, and I have used it, of course, in the book. And I've stayed in touch with their family. Oops, I've got to, sorry about this. I'm going to share my screen again because I want to share you this. So, so here we have in the top left-hand corner, Terry and her mom, Evelyn. And Evelyn and Doug celebrated 68 years of marriage. So you can see, Evelyn and Doug having a smooch. And Evelyn was a phenomenal knitter of sweaters. She knit personalized sweaters for so many different people. And in the bottom right-hand corner, Terry sent me this photo. Her mom had the grooviest glasses. Aren't those the best? And she framed them. She framed her mom's glasses, which I think is a beautiful idea. And I received just before Christmas this lengthy, beautiful piece written by Doug about his Evelyn. And on Christmas evening, I curled up with a cider and I read through this, and yes, I will absolutely agree with Doug. Evelyn is indeed a remarkable woman. And it's just such an honor for them to have let me into their life in that way. I've really, really, truly been, that's been the best part of the book, is the connections. Okay. Oh boy, time's going far too fast. Tell you what, I'm going to go here. I want to share this lesson with you. Bruce Binney, expand your definition of mentor. Let me grab a little more water here. Okay. Bruce Colin Binney, 1941 to 2019. By the early 90s, Bruce was very fortunate to be able to move to Beth Tikva, a new group home in Westdale for developmentally disabled older adults. This became a secure and much loved home for him. Bruce was definitely a part of his community, involved in a myriad of activities, riding his bike, having coffee, meeting everyone in Westdale. He was always the friendliest person in the room and introduced himself to all he met. Bruce's great niece, Laura Vandersteen, writes about trips to stay with Bruce and her great-grandmother on his tribute page. These are Laura's words. Bruce and I baked on his strong encouragement, spent time counting his pennies, picking mint for Graham's boiled new potatoes, and watched as the jello set on the porch in the cold, late winter days. He would sit in his deep olive green lazy boy and watch wrestling and always share his chips, and I poured his strong tea from a miniature tea set. Bruce always encouraged my experiments and would exclaim me a genius for my tinfoil creations that mostly resembled alien monuments. Bruce would plead for Graham to take us downtown for a shamrock shake, a request she always honored. Bruce shared his Cocoa Puffs and made me feel like I had a true grown-up friend. Bruce's life lessons are dedicated to anyone who thinks the only way to be a mentor is to achieve a certain level of education or a professional title. Laura took us with her back to her childhood so that we could meet Bruce. We are better for knowing him through her eyes. And my question for you is, have you had a mentor that breaks the stereotype of older and more educated? Is there a friendliest person in a place you frequent that you could learn from? And one of the reasons I wanted to share that excerpt with you, aside from the fact that I love it, is that when I got in touch with Laura to get her permission to include the excerpt from the obituary and her comments from the tribute page, and that's the only place I've done that. I just, as an aside, often when I was trying to find people, I could go to a tribute page and at least try to make some connections on where I could start with finding people. And then I came across Laura's comments and I loved them. And she was really thrilled to have her uncle included in the book. And it was very important to her. She wanted me to know that she studied, I'm gonna look this up just to get this right. I'm forgetting this now. She's heavily involved in psychology and counseling and acute neuroscience. That's what it is. And she said that her uncle was the reason she pursued that, and she thinks about him a lot. She has a phenomenal podcast called I Lobe You, lobe as in brain lobe, that I've been listening to, and I really love it. So he truly was a mentor to his niece, and I love that. Okay, I'm not going to read. I have a long list of things I'd love to share here, and I'm going to have to jump ahead and just pick a couple. But one thing I wanted to share is that I've written in here about one of the chapters. So July, is entitled "Why Canada Needs Immigrants," and I pulled various obituaries that made me feel really, really grateful for the people that have chosen Canada as their home and have made it better. And so one of those people is Dagmar Vasu. And she, I can speak off the top of my head about her, but I really want to make sure I get it right. So she trained twice to become a doctor. She was born and raised and educated in Estonia, and she got her medical degree from the University of Tartu during World War II. She practiced medicine in Estonia and then in Sweden before settling in Montreal. She raised 2 children while requalifying to work in Quebec. And in this chapter, I go into a little bit about all the things that are required of someone who comes as an international doctor and retrains. It's very, very rigorous. So one of the things that it was included in her obituary is that she, as part of her retraining, she rode in an ambulance in Montreal, and she was given the name the Petite physician on wheels. People were always amazed that this little petite physician would show up, and she could move people and revive people and took control of the situation, and people were so admiring of her that the Montreal Gazette wrote this piece. So in doing my research, I dug up this, sorry, I keep forgetting to share before I move along here. I dug up this article about Dagmar. There she is, the petite physician on wheels. And after I got in touch with her daughter, and she's actually, her daughter Helen is just recently retired as an anesthesiologist in Toronto, and she was thrilled for her mom to be in the book. And so I was able to get this newspaper clipping from a newspaper service, and I sent it to Helen, and I got this note back immediately from her iPhone. I'm going to read it to you here. It says, Tamara, I just realized this article was written April 21st, 1952. I was born on September 22nd, 1952. So she was 4 months pregnant at the time. That means I must have ridden with her in the ambulances too. And I just love that because she hadn't realized that. And I felt really honored to be the one that was able to really, I guess it's like a gift for her to know that her mom was just so incredibly, she did all these things and she was doing this while she was pregnant, which it's pretty awesome. Okay. I want to read one that really resonates with me right now. And this one is actually, I find quite interesting because when the obituary was printed in the Globe and Mail, I had actually called the family about another excerpt, and that is in the book as well. But the son said to me, it just drives me crazy because there's this one line that for whatever reason, it just didn't show up in the Globe and Mail. And he wanted to share it with me, so he sent it. And so actually this is the line that I've used. And I struggled a little bit with whether or not I would use it because it wasn't really in the obituary. And then I ended up coming to the conclusion that it's not about the ad, so to speak. It's about the process of writing the obituary and what people remember about someone and how they put it into a life story. And so when I got back in touch with Al Cook, the son, he was just so pleased that his sentence was going to actually be published. And so here it is. And this is for me right now, I think, such a relevant lesson, just because we have two teenage boys that just seem so largely disinterested in us right now. And I'm just trying to figure out, and I know we're doing a lot of nagging about things that need to be done. So this one reminds me to just lighten up a little bit and be a little more fun. So this is the lesson from James Gordon Cook, 1926 to 2019. Don't get teed off, just get to tee off in time. Here's the excerpt. Mom had a temper, Dad did not. Unless you broke the one simple rule. The car must be home by 5:30 a.m. on weekends so he wouldn't be late for his standard 6:30 a.m. tea time at Summit. On occasion, one or more of the three reprobates, the three boys, the three reprobates would arrive home with minutes to spare to find Dad resplendent in his Herb Tarlick inspired golf slacks, waiting anxiously at the end of the driveway. Put it in park and get out. A man of very few words indeed. Even though Gord loved to golf, it's pretty obvious that Marion, his wife of 60 years, the three reprobates, his sons, and his posse of 6 grandchildren were valued above all else. This is a man who sat on the sidelines watching his boys play sports and never once shouted at a referee, umpire, or coach. He kept a cool head at home by swinging madly on the greens. When our kids were little, I'd spread out on the floor to play with them. We'd leave paint footprints across the carpet, eat meals under the table, and stop to examine every bug on neighborhood walks. By the time they turned 13, my patience had run dry. Today, I bark at them, nag regularly, and some days have to give myself a timeout. Recently, my husband asked me, "How do you want them to remember you?" Gulp. I'd fooled myself into thinking that the early years were akin to compounding interest. I thought all my deposits were gaining interest, ready to be pulled out by the handful at a date to be determined. The question from the man who drags all the mattresses into the living room for family movie night delivered a welcome reality check. Apparently, recent memory pulls rank, leaving most of us with a smattering of the very best and worst memories to draw from our distant past. So while my fun dad husband builds up his stock options faster than our 15-year-old's feet are growing, I'm left sitting on pocket change. Cue Gord and his timely advice for parenting teenagers. It turns out my best parenting moments may be yet to come. So my question for you is, Are there things that tee you off that you could shrug off instead? Not all of them, just a few. I think it's question time. I'm gonna stop there and invite some questions from anyone who has any questions.
Thank you so much, Tamara. I think you chose well in terms of the ones you wanted to share. And I have to say, you know, I love any book, movie, song, whatever that makes you both laugh and cry. And I think you successfully did that for me. So thank you. And we do have some questions coming in. And so I'd love to hear what you have to say. So first off, from Karen and Julie, they're both expressing love for your book. And they want to know how they can get the word out. Karen's asking, how can we get the word out to other people to read and share it? So she's wondering how to comment or review it in a way that'll help you. And also Julie's wondering where she can tell her friends to go and buy the book.
I love those questions. Thank you. So to buy the book, the official release is actually March 13th. So if you're in Kamloops, you can actually get your hands on the books early at our local chapters or at Pratt's. And the book is now available for pre-order on Chapters and Amazon. And I absolutely encourage people to ask for it at their local independent bookstore, because local bookstores can order from Mosaic Press. And yeah, thanks for the question about reviews. Chapters, Amazon and Goodreads are all places where reviews would be enormously helpful to me if you like the book, or if you don't like the book. Or
yeah, great. Thank you, Tamara. Also, Karen's wondering about how did you manage in book launch during COVID? And I know you made reference to that challenge or the strangeness of that, but can you comment on that?
Okay, so so the books, my books were coming, they arrived at the end of November. I was excited just in time for Christmas, and I knew that there were restrictions, of course, with doing anything inside, but I had envisioned a drive-by reading. I was going to pull out our little gas-fired pit, and I was going to create a little mini stage and serve apple cider and read poetry. And then just before that, the order came out from Bonnie Henry, December 2nd. And I actually have it here in front of me because she very specifically mentions here, you're not allowed to have any drive-through events, including, and it lists a whole bunch of things. And I thought this was kind of funny, including, it says book signings, but strip dancing is right before that. List. I just can't imagine who would do any outside drive-by. Has anyone heard of that? Anyway, so I couldn't do a book signing. And so what I did is I went to Value Village and I picked up a whole bunch of ornaments, and I wrote each of the 120 life lessons on a single ornament and went and hung them on the tree outside our house. And my boys silently came out and hung them with me. And my husband dusted off some old floodlights and lit up the tree. And it was just, it was very emotional for me. It was spectacular. It was very silent, but very meaningful. And I was able to take photos of those ornaments and send them to a number of the families.
That's great. And I did see a picture of that. I think, I can't remember which media piece that was in, but there was a picture of you and the family with the tree, actually. Yeah, it might have been.
Shelley Joyce did an interview, which I really appreciated. And then Castanet did they asked for a photo and I sent that. So that was great.
Yeah. Another question here. I know you talked a little bit about this, but can you comment? I mean, it was very much not just a writing project. This was a project of connecting with people across our country. And I was amazed by that. And Julie's very curious about that as well, about the stories. She's curious if you can comment on this, you know, connecting with the families and the loved ones of the person in the obituary. And so what?
I will tell you that 20% of the people I contacted said no. So I needed to do a total rewrite. I think one of the most surprising things for me is the people that I thought were most likely to say no didn't. So anyone with a younger child, it was very, very positive and enthusiastic with the message. My greatest fear is that they'll be forgotten. And then in turn, there's some people that, their loved one had died 15 years ago at the age of 80, and they just were they're very private, or for some reason didn't want to share. And so, I take a big gulp and hope that I hadn't hurt their feelings in my ask. And then I would go back to my very, very large collection of obituaries and find something else. I will tell you that I spent the longest amount of time it took to find a single person was 20 hours. And so I would do things like I would often start with grandkids' names because they often have less common names. So if I could take that name and pair it with the last name, I could maybe find them on Facebook and work back from there. It's a huge exercise in finding people.
That's great, thank you. There is a question about, will copies be in our libraries? Tamara, you may not be the one to answer that, so I'm going to save that question for the end, and we'll ask our.
I do know.
Oh, you do know, good.
Yes, my lovely friend Tanya sent me a picture as soon as it was it was really cool to see it, like with the sticker on the spine. I really appreciated she sent that to me, and anyway, the last time I looked, there were 10 holds on it, which was exciting to me. So yes,
so more copies needed. More copies needed, right?
Well,
there's a question from Sonia. Sonia has some interesting comments in the chat. She's considering how important it is to leave instructions on what photo to use in your own obituary, but she's actually got a question for you about, have you considered or even written what you would want to see in your own obituary?
I have, and I update it regularly. And I've written obituaries for a lot of other people too. Like I wrote one for my mom. It was really important to me because my mom became pregnant very early and she didn't finish high school. And I think she's always been quite insecure about her sort of lack of traditional accomplishments. And I really wanted to write an obituary for her more as a love letter, just to show her that, like, there are an infinite number of wonderful things I could say about her that have nothing to do with education or jobs she's held. And so I really took great pleasure in writing that and sending it to her. And I've done that with other family members. But yes, I've written mine. And, I have to say, when you write your own obituary, you get pretty clear on what matters and how you want to spend your remaining time.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I'd like to ask a question if I can, Tamara. Was this the first book you imagined publishing? I mean, I like the story about, because I remember the article in the Globe and Mail, and I think it came out in 2019. Middle of 2019, is that right?
I think it was like November 2019.
November 2019. And then so you were approached after that article, but I'm going to guess this wasn't the first book you thought you would be publishing. Is that right?
I've been trying to kind of find my voice on something, and it's funny because this was happening all the while, and I never once thought about writing about it. I've played poetry, and I can't write fiction for the life of me. I just can't. I think part of it is I started writing when I was 13 in a journal very regularly, and I always come back to my the first person voice, and so I've come to the conclusion I just need to run with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good realization. We have a message here in the chat from Sherry, who's saying that you may be interested that their book club last month, they wrote their own obituaries, and it was a very heartfelt exercise.
I love that. Wonderful.
You mentioned she also wrote her mom's obituary, and in any case, someone else is commenting that that's a wonderful thing to do with the book club. We have someone, KJ Ma, who's wondering about your next project. Will you write another book? Will it be a similar topic? Do you have plans there? Is that something you don't talk about?
No, actually, I'm just going to share a screen here quick because one of the things I've been thinking about is trying to get people to think about, I really felt this way during COVID when we're losing a number of people that are older that are holding really important stories, and trying to think of a way to start something. I actually bought the domain Save Their Story Project, and I want to start getting out questions that people of all ages can use to start asking their loved ones. I mean, particularly older people, but anyone, just some questions like, well, I've had about 100 questions, but I'd love to sort of create a movement with that, because what happens, I think, and I've heard this from a lot of people, is that when someone dies, they enjoy the process of maybe learning more about their loved one from people that they worked with or people that they knew when they were younger, but they feel like they only have part of the story, not the whole story. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could flesh out those stories and learn from them and pass them on to future generations? I'm also, a number of people have told me about sort of love letters or things that they've done for their loved ones while they're still alive. And that's something that I'm working on. One thing I'll just share quickly that I thought was phenomenal. A woman was she was buying something for me on Kijiji, and we were having a chat in the driveway the other day. And she was saying that her father was known, he was a real party guy. He loved piano bars, and he would always celebrate his birthday. And when he got too old to go out anymore, he was 93, that all the grandkids would come over and they'd poke through his funky clothes in his closet, and they would all dress up and they would line up down the staircase and have their photo taken by their grandfather, and they would go out and celebrate his birthday for him. And then they would come back, and over breakfast the next morning, they would tell him all the stories of how they celebrated his birthday. And so he died a couple of years ago, and all the grandkids still go out every single birthday dressed up in his clothes, and they celebrate it for him. And I think I'd like to write something about those other ways that people are memorialized or honored like that, because I have so many stories now.
There are so many stories. And on that topic of writing further stories, Julie has a question about, have you ever thought about offering to help other people write obituaries for their loved ones?
Oh, that's great. I do actually have helped a lot of people write obituaries for their loved ones. I'm always happy to help with that.
And that's interesting. Did you discover anything about the writing of an obituary? Because when you look through, the obituaries in your book, you list who the relationship of the obituary writer to the person who had died. And when you scan through that list, I find it heartbreaking to look, that a mother is writing an obituary for their son or daughter. And you read one of those today, actually, and I find that particularly heartbreaking. But often we see son or daughter, or sometimes we see husband or wife. But did you learn anything about the writing of obituaries, and maybe about who is best qualified to write the obituary?
Yeah, and I've done a little handout on 10 ways to, approach writing an obituary. I have thought of actually writing like a little ebook or something like that. Because there are a number of things that stand out for me as particularly effective, like when people tell a story, or when they use metaphors, or when they use dialogue. I do. I certainly, when I've helped friends or written obituaries for friends, I've certainly called upon some of those. And it is heartbreaking. One of the moms that I spoke to told me that she felt that writing her the obituary for her son was her last act of motherly love, and I really felt that.
Yeah, of course. My gosh. Another question for you. I mean, it's a question about questions, actually, because I get the idea, Tamara, that questions are very, very important to you. Not only from this book, where you actually end every segment with a question to sort of compel people to think about what this is telling them, but I know that in your other involvements and your other activities too have often been based around the power of questions. And I'm thinking spark your imagination and such. Can you talk about questions a little bit? Because this is obviously something really important to you.
Well, I studied journalism, and I had a professor in second year journalism that was really big on questions. I actually remember him playing a Barbara Walters segment, and he couldn't stand the way she asked questions, because she asked double-barreled questions, 2 questions in one, that left the people she was interviewing kind of stunned and unable to cope with either question, or leading questions. And he really hammered home the importance of open-ended questions, so that you're not creating a biased response, right? You're not influencing the response. And it's something I work on. I come by it honestly. I talk a lot. I'm distracted, and I've worked my whole life to be a better listener. And the only way for me to do that is to figure out good questions to ask and to be interested enough in the answers that I can just shut up and listen. So questions are important.
Yeah, thank you. We'll take a couple more questions here. Karen is wondering, is there any person who you contacted for permission to print their relative's obituary that stood out to you? I know you talked about some of them today, but is there anyone in particular?
Oh my goodness. I mean, there have just been, there's just been so many. There is one person who I got in touch with, George Mode's widow, Louise, and she sent me a note actually just around Christmas time, and I had commented. It said in his obituary that he was wearing George Patton's shirt because George Patton's shirt. The Patton was his very favorite movie, and he wanted to be buried in in Patton movie shirt. And she sent me a note saying that the way I drew out that piece in the obituary helped her understand why her George was such an admirer of George Patton, and she so appreciated the insight I had. And I was so honored by that because it was such a connection with her that she felt I provided some insight. That was a special one.
Of course. And again, I mean, there's so much meaningful activity here beyond just the writing of the book, but the connecting with the people.
Sorry, there's one more. Can I just
tell you? Of course.
And I was going to end with this, but Andrew Batten, he passed away. He died in his early 50s, and I got in touch with his widow Debbie, and she's just a marvelous person who, I mean, they were total soulmates, and she's just, you know, it's been a real journey for her. And we've stayed in touch, and we've spoken many times. She's become quite spiritual, and I've learned so much from her. But one of the things she did early on is share me a video that was created for him by mutual friends of theirs for his memorial service. And there was a lot of intimacy to the film, and I very clearly remember there's this one segment where he's swimming underwater and he mouths the words, she's holding the camera, and he mouths the words, "I love you" to her. And I was so honored that, you know, to be included in that. But one of the things that I thought was pretty amazing is he wrote plays, and he wrote many plays for theaters in Toronto. And he had written a play actually about her family called The Sad Blisters, about their 5 girls in the family. And he died just before the play went live. And so she quite an introvert, she picked it up, and she was actually the director of his play. And I just thought that was incredibly brave and poignant.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've got one more little question here, Tamara, and then we're going to wrap this up. Tamarack House is wondering, are you going to keep collecting obituaries? It seems like such a good formula for meaningful connection building, sharing, and caring.
Oh, thank you. I am. Thank you for that. And this kind of made me chuckle when I did the CBC Maritime Noon segment a couple of days ago. A woman called in and she said they're the best tool for finding baby names from any era. But you know, it's there might be a utilitarian purpose. But after I thought, you know, what a wonderful way to honor, really, to carry forth those names. And to she said that she enjoyed making a note of, you know, what she enjoyed about the name based on what was said in the obituary. I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, obituaries I think can serve lots of different purposes, but lots of lessons from my life have come from them, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing. And we have lots of amazing compliments for you in the book coming in through the chat. And I know, including from Alan, and I know your family must be so proud of you for the work that you've done in this book. So thank you so much. We're out of time tonight, but thank you for taking the time to share this with us. We've had an amazing crowd. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. This will be available for viewing later. So if you know someone who didn't get a chance to tune in tonight, you can certainly send them the link and you can find that link at the library. So I'd like to thank the library for partnering with us on these kinds of events and having amazing people like Tamara talk. At the Kamloops Society for the Written Arts, our whole focus on author talks is cool people talking about cool things. And I think that you have certainly exemplified that for us tonight, Tamara.
Oh, this is such an honor. So thank you to both parties for your role in this. And just, like everyone who's here, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And I encourage people to go to kswa.ca. You'll find some of our other upcoming events. March 25th, we have an author from Northern Ontario named Emmett Grogan. So we encourage you to tune in again at that time. So I'll pass it back to Joe at the library here for a final comment, if you want, Joe.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, JP, and thank you, Tamara. We really appreciate it. Before we go, I want to share with you some other upcoming events we are hosting here. So next up in our virtual author series is Ontario author Emmett Grogan. And he's sharing his book, 12 Stories. And this will be right back here on Zoom and YouTube Live on Thursday, March 25th at 6:30 p.m. Also on April 8th, we will have first-time author Elaine Alex speaking about her book, Calling My Spirit Back. And this is a memoir about growing up as an Indigenous girl in Canada and the impacts of colonization. And it also provides Indigenous knowledge, teachings, and tangible steps on how to cultivate safe spaces for diversity and inclusion. And registration for this event opens on March 15th. Thanks again for joining us tonight. And as always, if you have any questions, please reach out to us at the library. You can email us at questions@tnrd.ca or give us a call at 250-372-5145, or you can send us a message on Facebook. Once again, thank you, and I hope everyone has a good night. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Jiffy.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for supporting local culture.